I'd like to start with Psalm 111, and to do that in celebration of the godly heritage and history given to us by our faith ancestors. Praise the Lord, I will give thanks to the Lord with my whole heart, in the company of the upright in the congregation. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Full of honor and majesty in his work, and his righteousness endures forever. He's gained renown by his wonderful deeds. The Lord is gracious and merciful. He provides food for those who fear him. He's ever mindful of his covenant. He has shown his people the power of his works in giving them the heritage of the nations. The works of his hands are faithful and just. All his precepts are trustworthy. They are established forever and ever, to be performed with faithfulness and uprightness. He has sent redemption to his people. He has commanded his covenant forever. Holy and awesome is his name. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who practice it have a good understanding. His praise endures forever. And then a shift to A History of the World in 100 Objects. It was written by one of the curators of the British Museum who feels that the whole purpose of a museum is to tell our story. But he took it a step further as part of a series they did to symbolize pieces of 100 objects that would literally capture the history of the world. And he explains it this way. The book tries to tell a history of the world in a way which has not been attempted before, by deciphering the messages which objects communicate across time. Messages about people and places, environments and interactions, about different moments in history, and about our own time as we reflect upon it. These signals from the past, some reliable, some conjectural, may still want to be retrieved, as they're unlike other evidence we could ever encounter. They speak of whole societies and complex processes rather than individual events. And when we look at the history of the world, it is very important to recognize that we're not looking at the history of different civilizations truncated and separated from each other. Civilizations have a huge amount of contact, and there's a kind of interconnectedness. And it is that idea of separate but connected that we share today. So before I begin, I invite the kids of a choice to listen to me, or I want you to think about how many cousins you have, because I will tell you later how many I have, and what do you like to do with your grandparents? Okay? How many cousins do you have, and what do you like to do with your grandparents? So a few weeks ago, we were on a tour of the New York Historical Museum, and we saw a display that covered the history of New York in just 101 objects. So that was a mix of the drama, the humor, the uniqueness, some of the firsts, those enduring firsts that make up the history of New York. They had, for example, a potato to represent the famine in Ireland that led to the massive Irish immigration and eventually to bagpipes at firemen's funerals. They have the extinct subway token, everybody remembers those, celebrating the trains that have run since 1904. So on and on, the history of New York comes to life, object after object, through shoes and arrowheads and dust and bagels and toys and buttons and a Dutch dictionary, on and on and on. So as we explored the objects in the book about them, we discovered that the premise of this idea came from A History of the World in 100 Objects. So there's stones and cups and tools and textiles and clay pots and tomb figures, coins and art They all mark transformative roles across thousands of years and millions of miles. So a history, a considered reflection, that well thought out understanding of the past is captured in symbol. Objects that communicate their message across time. They tell the stories of history and heritage rather than just one single event. So they can capture something as grand and immense as a city or the world itself. But then I wondered, what would be a symbol, one object, that could be the storyteller of my history and heritage? And as Thanksgiving approaches, that becomes a spiritual question. It's one I've asked myself, and now ask you to consider as well. What one object do you possess that sums up the history and heritage of your life and all that you are thankful for, grateful for this holiday season? I thought, how do I reduce to one mere object, one symbol, all that has brought me to this moment, to this reflection? What one symbolic or sentimental thing best reflects so much that I'm grateful for? And gratitude, not just Thanksgiving time, but ongoing, ever-growing gratitude for the history and heritage that both grounds me and lifts me up to my particular place in the world. So the image of a bunch of balloons came to mind. With each of the balloons, pretend there's a dozen, all tied together with string and held in place by a weight tether. So I thought, what is the symbol that is my weight tether? What holds my bunch of balloons in place? You know, the something that comes to you will be a clear, true aha moment. So for me, the object that best gratefully tells the story, the history, the heritage, the tether weight to my balloons, is my grandmother's wallet. So my grandmother, Azealia, was the matriarch of my dad's side of the family. The mother of 8. Okay, the cousins question, how many cousins? How many cousins do you have? How many cousins? Someone wants to answer. How many?
5.
Very good. More or less, anybody else? Cousins? 5. How many? 7. That's a good family. Nick, how many?
7.
8. 8. How many?
14.
Whoa. Anybody top 14?
43.
Wow. Anybody in the top 43? Well, my grandmother Azealia was the mother of 8, the grandmother of 66. I have 65 cousins. That's my dad's side of the family. We have lots of twins and lots of big families. So my grandma Azealia, she was this woman, as you can imagine, of courage, compassion, and faith. Values that she managed to stress to all 64 of us. And as the psalmist wrote of our godly heritage, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who practice it have a good understanding. His praise endures forever. Although Grandma would not have said fear, she would have said respect and love. The fear is not that, it is the respect of the Lord. So even with so many cousins, I was fortunate to be in a situation to spend quite a bit of time with her, to learn her stories, and see so much modeled for me. And as she was in the last months of her life, she gave me her wallet, something of hers that I'd always been fascinated by. because with so many cousins, I share the birthday closest to her. So she had this gift for making people feel special, each one of us, so that she could make you all feel like she had time just for you. She knew just what was going on with you. And that has been symbolized in this wallet to me for a few decades. So this is one object, is a timeless interconnectedness of heritage and of faith, of values, insight, experience, roots and wings, in all that I learned from her that made such a difference for me. So now I ask you, and maybe at the brunch too, how do you tell your history, your heritage, in one object? What is the symbol of your Thanksgiving for your heritage?